Here's an update to the government shutdown. The USDA has announced there will be no SNAP benefits to over 40 million Americans if a resolution is not agreed upon by the end of the week. SNAP benefits are food aid that go to lower income families in America. Now, this report will provide details as to who will be affected and some possible remedies.
Government shutdown enters its 27th day. It's the longest shutdown in history. The stakes for families across the country continue to rise. Thousands are already facing the reality of no paychecks at all. But soon that same reality will hit more than 40 million people who receive benefits from the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, also known as SNAP. Money for that program is set to run out this Saturday. That means 1 in 8 Americans may not be able to afford groceries come next month.
We want to reopen the government, and we need to stand by our hardworking federal employees who are doing all that they can to make sure that taxpayer dollars are spent effectively and efficiently, even under the most adverse circumstances. Remember, in terms of federal employees, the Trump administration has fired or dismissed more than 200,000 civil servants prior to them shutting the government down on October 1st.
Day 27 means it's almost been a full month since the Democrats shut down the government. And as we near the end of this month, the pain being felt by so many hardworking people around this country is very real, and it gets worse with each passing day. Republicans do not have the ability to do this on our own. It's a simple math problem. We need Democrats to help.
All right, let's go live now to our nation's capital and CBS News congressional correspondent Nicole Killian. Nicole, thank you for your time today. The Trump administration says that it won't tap into $5 billion in contingency funds to keep SNAP benefits flowing into November. Do we know why they're choosing to do that?
Well, Speaker Johnson addressed this a short time ago in that same press conference that you ran, and he did say that it doesn't appear that they can legally use those contingency funds to continue paying out benefits. So that is one explanation, but it certainly presents an issue for the 40+ million Americans out there who rely on SNAP benefits, with the USDA warning over the weekend on its website, quote, "The well has run dry," and that it will not issue benefits beginning November 1st. So what that means is that perhaps some states may have to pick up the tab. Also, obviously, a lot of food pantries potentially stand to be impacted, given what is likely to be an increasing need for food in light of these benefits no longer being paid out potentially.
Yeah, Nicole, so what is the latest right now on negotiations? Can we actually expect to see any votes on reopening the government happen today?
Well, as of now, even though the Senate was out over the weekend, there are no votes currently scheduled around government funding. You know, we see every so often the Senate take these votes on what's known as a continuing resolution that would fund the government through mid-November. So that is currently not on the schedule for today. It's possible, certainly, the Senate may try again at some point this week, although we have seen those votes continually fail. What we may see happen is that instead the Senate may take more of a piecemeal approach. There are a number of different bills floating out there to pay certain federal workers, whether that's air traffic controllers who are going to miss a paycheck starting tomorrow, or troops whose next pay period is due come Friday. There are also compromise legislation that's being discussed between Senators Johnson and Senator Van Hollen, potentially to pay not only some essential federal workers, but furloughed federal workers as well. So we'll see if any of those measures gets enough votes to clear the Senate, but those are some measures that may possibly be considered this week.
Yeah, and Nicole, I know last time we spoke, Republicans needed about 5 Democrats to cross the aisle and join them. Has that changed, that number changed at all? Has it moved up, moved down, anything?
It hasn't in terms of these votes that I mentioned regarding the continuing resolution. You know, it keeps failing by the same margin over and over again. So that's why Republican leaders keep saying we just need 5 Senate Democrats. But again, that will be a dynamic we will watch if, in fact, that same vote comes up again at some point this week, namely because you have the largest union representing federal workers that sent a letter to congressional leaders today saying, look, pass this clean calling continuing resolution, just fund the government, let's end the shutdown now. So again, whether that has any bearing on Democrats' posture or calculus going forward remains to be seen. But we just heard from Leader Jeffries, as you played that clip there from Face the Nation, where he continues to insist that the health care issue must be addressed as well before Democrats are able to be in a position to give those votes up to reopen the government.
Yeah. Okay, Nicole Killian at the Capitol for us.
For those counting along, marks day 27 of the government shutdown, second longest in American history, but the first time that Americans have faced losing food benefits as a consequence of the shutdown. About 1 in 8 Americans depend on SNAP benefits, formerly known as food stamps, to help pay for their groceries. It comes out to about $177 per person each month. That's the average. And there is a contingency fund for emergencies, such as this one. But the Trump administration says the money is reserved for things like helping people in disaster, so no good at the moment. Some states, though, are trying to step in, take action on their own in response. In California, for example, Governor Gavin Newsom has called in the National Guard to help food banks sort produce and box meals as they anticipate higher demand. And over in Virginia, the governor declared a state of emergency to make state funding available to support food programs. Joining us now to talk about all of this is Gina Platanino, an interim director at the nonprofit Food Research and Action Center. She looks and studies at SNAP. Gina, thank you very much for being here. Give us the state of things. How serious is this situation?
Incredibly serious. The people relying on this benefit are our most vulnerable. For the most part, they're making less than $1,000 a month, right? This means that they may not be able to pay their rent. They may not be able to pay childcare. They may not be able to have food on the table for their children when they come home. And this will set them back. These are individuals who are living paycheck to paycheck, veterans, older adults, people with disabilities who are counting on this fund. It's, this program is supposed to be supplemental, but for many people, this is their sole food budget.
So, Gina, this is the second longest government shutdown. The longest was 2018 to 2019. That one lasted 35 days. What happened with SNAP benefits then?
The secretary then was able to utilize appropriated funding to issue benefits earlier. So individuals got their benefits, their December benefits, their January benefits, and then they got their February benefits a couple of days afterwards. So it allowed individuals to be able to plan, but it still had a detrimental effect, loss of faith in government, because individuals still weren't sure in terms of communication and whether March benefits were going to come around. So it's really uncertain. The unnecessary chaos that it causes on individuals' lives when they're depending on these funds.
What do you make of the USDA saying they're not going to release emergency funds to cover the SNAP shortfall? And if they were to release the funds, would it cover everything?
It would cover a portion of it, but USDA also has other types of access. They have the authority to do so. They utilized it for WIC, where they funded it for $300 million. There's Section 32, which has billions of dollars as well to be able to cover the $2 billion or $3 billion that would be needed in order to cover whatever's now left in the contingency funding. But the Nutrition Act is clear. The Secretary has the authority, has the contingency fund that Congress gives to her to be able to utilize it at such a time as this, which is the entitlement program, so that benefits could be funded and not delayed.
So, Gina, has the contingency funding, because that's $5 billion, has that been used in a case like this? Because the USDA in this memo says that funding is really just for disaster situations. And then in this memo, they do call out Democrats specifically saying that they need to open up the government in order for people to get their food stamps. What do you make of that?
I say this is a man-made disaster that could be easily avoided. Regardless of what's going on in the shutdown, that's why Congress gives, both parties, gives the Secretary the authority to be able to utilize contingency funds, and they're currently using them to pay administrative funding. Because remember, the benefit amounts, that always comes from the government, and USDA and the states cover 50 and 50% the administrative costs. So that contingency fund is currently being used for that. So there's no reason for them to not be able to utilize the rest of the funding to cover SNAP benefits and utilize other Section 32 or, CCC funding in order to make sure that people's benefits get there on time.
So what do you say to people who say that this is a political move?
you know, people are not chess pieces, right? These are individuals who are not going to, their landlord's not going to say, oh, I'm sorry that the Secretary of Agriculture is not utilizing her authority to be able to issue funds. People are going to have to make hard choices. And it would just, again, remind individuals that it's a contract that you enter when you sign that application, that you will receive these benefits. It's never happened in the history, and we just don't want this to continue. And so we really are pushing for the Secretary to utilize her authority to be able to issue these funds regardless of what's going on with the shutdown.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, the USDA says those funds are only for disaster situations like Hurricane Melissa. So that's why they say they're not using those funds. Gina Platanino, thank you so much. That was today's, by the way.
It is day 27 of the government shutdown. Lawmakers may be returning to Capitol Hill, but this comes as thousands of people across the country now go without paychecks and potentially could see more Americans going without SNAP benefits. This is federal assistance for food. We are also approaching the cliff for open enrollment and Obamacare. So these are key things impacting so many people. Joining me now from Capitol Hill is Nicole Killian, our CBS News congressional correspondent. Nicole, good Monday morning to you. And this number really jumped out at me during our morning call today. 40 million Americans rely on these SNAP benefits. What is the latest on negotiations and who is about to suffer?
Well, I mean, look, I think a lot of folks out there are feeling the pain from this shutdown, whether it is people who may not get those SNAP benefits next month, workers who continue to be furloughed without pay, those who are continuing to show up for their jobs, without pay. So it's a difficult situation all around, and it certainly is taking an economic toll as well. In terms of the SNAP program, though, this is something where the USDA warned over the weekend that its well has run dry, even though USDA does have a bit of a contingency fund. But the agency indicated over the weekend that it is unlikely to tap into that to try to pay out more benefits for SNAP. Now, there is a bill floating here in the Senate from Senator Josh Hawley to try to continue those benefits, but unclear if it can get through all the necessary hurdles before that November 1st deadline hits.
And Nicole, we know that Speaker Johnson addressed reporters just a few moments ago. What jumped out at you from his remarks?
Well, obviously, the Speaker continues to pin the blame on Democrats for this shutdown, saying that we need them at this point to reopen the government, particularly in the Senate. So both he and Leader Thune have continued to indicate that they just need a handful of Democrats to sign on to this clean extension of government funding. He was joined by the SBA Administrator Kelly Loeffler, who talked about small business loans being blocked for hundreds, if not thousands, of businesses across the country. And so how that is starting to impact Main Street as well. So as I mentioned, the pinch is being felt everywhere. But again, Democratic leaders, for their part, continue to insist that Republicans need to come to the table for this shutdown to end. More specifically, that they need to continue to address this issue of rising health care costs, especially ahead of the open enrollment period for the Affordable Care Act, which kicks off in just a matter of days.
Yeah, it will impact so many of the people watching. Nicole Killian across all the latest for us. Nicole.